What's up, everyone? Very special guest today, a veteran. He served our country with valor, bravery. He sacrificed for all our freedom in the United States. He's a former Tier 1 special ops operator. He served in the Middle East for most of his military career, facing terrorists, point blank, the actual terrorist. He's faced the terrorist. He's confronted the terrorist. He's been attacked by terrorists. He went to neighborhoods where the terrorists are. You know, he's actually the truth, and he's someone that I respect, and I love his content. Stoic Viking, welcome to the podcast, brother.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man. So right now we're in a place where a lot of former military guys are getting on social media. It's almost like they went from serving their country and engaging in public service to saying, hey, I'm going to jump ship, similar to lawyers, maybe that work for the government, then they go work at private law firms. It's almost like, the military guys are jumping ship and joining maybe some lobbying groups, serving other countries. And unfortunately, some of them have decided to go and work as traitors, I think. And I think that's a little bit harsher maybe than you would use the language. I mean, have you been offered by a foreign country ever? Like, is that just something that's becoming more popular for guys with your elite resume to do something like that?
Not really that much. I think there's special circumstances, and I will give you an example of like John Carricow, who was a whistleblower for the CIA. And, he now does, I believe he has an internet show that's funded by the Russians. So he's kind of one of the only people that I know of. I have personally never been approached by a foreign government, and I don't know to the extremes that anybody has. There definitely could be, but I'm not. And from the channels and people that I know, that's not really something that has really been talked about that I personally know of. I do think that I think it's simpler than that, which is people are looking for views. People are trying to do clickbait things, and they see an issue, and some of them jump on one side of it to almost to the extreme, and it gets great views and it gets very clickbaity. So I think that's probably more of what's going on, is people see the opportunity, like, wow, I can get views, I can get followers, let me jump on this issue. And the more extreme that they may talk about, some of this tinfoil hat commentary is kind of what some of them are going for, which, I strongly oppose, but that's just me.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that I get what you're saying, man, because if you make content and you go into these conspiracy theories, especially I think at this point, if you promote isolationism and you just package that up, that's America first, isolationism. We completely withdraw from the Middle East. We completely withdraw from Eastern Europe, the Asia Pacific theater. We withdraw from Latin America. We just withdraw from the whole world, and we hide in our closet. Then the big bad wolf will leave us alone. And it's like this idealistic world where there's no such thing as communists who want to destroy us, terrorists who want to expand and have us submit to them.
Yeah.
And like, I get it. Like, I honestly wish the world was that simple, bro. I wish the world was a world where we didn't have men that would, go into a hospital in Iran. A guy has a catheter inside of his penis. He's already injured, and you walk in there and you murder him. I mean, like, I wish we didn't live in a world like that, bro. But we actually do. We do have evil in this world, man.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point to bring up. So I think that there's two parts to this. Is one, first and foremost, and this can be applied to anything, nothing is that simple, right? Nothing is black and white. Almost everything lives within the gray. And so you have to understand that alone. So if you're like, okay, there's good, and we can just separate ourselves in the world, but history has taught us we cannot do that, right? And then this will sort of lead into why you have a lot of former veterans who are now isolationists. So if you look back at history, the United States at one point was an isolationist country, and that was prior essentially to World War I and World War II, which after the Second World War, we realized that we could no longer sit by the sidelines and let the world continue to basically tear itself apart. And that's when America stopped being an isolationist country, because they basically were until World War II, really. Because even after World War I, we kind of went back to being isolationist. And through a couple successes, Desert Storm, a couple other times, but we've had a couple failures. And I think this culminated, especially with our current generation of veterans, with the Iraq War. We were lied into that conflict. And that has put sort of a stain or a bit of a stigma to all the former vet guys, who lost people. And they're like, you know what? I don't want to be a part of these wars, right? But what we forget is that when there are injustices going on in the world, you can either sit back and let them happen, or you can do something about it. Yeah, we made mistakes. Yeah, we have. But you learn from those mistakes, you adapt, and then you take that going off, into the next conflict or the next situation, and you just try to do better. And that's really what it comes down to. And I think, especially in the situation of Iran, Iraq was, there's a lot of mistakes that happened with that. Unfortunately, we use what political capital we have to invade another country on Iraq, which not only, we shouldn't have been there. You actually took one of the countries that was kind of keeping Iran in check. And not only did you take them out, you created a power vacuum that Iran then filled, which expanded their power to levels that they never even dreamed they could get to. And then you have the Iranian people, which are, if my personal opinion, are probably one of the only populations in that part of the country who could actually, with sort of Western values, actually kind of be a success of what we would like for it to happen. Like you look at Persian culture prior to 1979, and it just was well respected. And you look at the Iranian diaspora, every Persian that you ever meet is successful. They're wealthy. Most of them are doctors, and combination, poetry, just the immense amounts of history and talent and just hard work that is just ingrained in the people in that country. It would be such a boon to the world for the Iranians to be basically their culture to be shared with the entire world. And I think that's one of the biggest drawbacks to the Islamic Republic right now.
Yeah, it's I'm American, and obviously, I mean, I'm born in Atlanta, Georgia. But you could tell from my accent, I'm American. But my wife is German, so I met her. My wife in Europe. I have a home here in Germany. I come back to America next month, or later this month. But the thing is, man, is that even here in Germany, the Iranians, the Iranian community here in Germany, they love this country in Germany. Similar to the Iranians, I would say, in France, they love France. The Iranians in England love England, and the Iranians in the United States definitely love the United States because, many of our families, they fled. My grandfather was my grandfather, I don't have to tell you like the story of like a guy I don't know. I'll tell you, how personal this is for me. My grandfather was one of the largest, most significant military leaders, commanders in Iran. He was the commander of Mashhad, the second largest city, worked with the Shah of Iran.
Yeah.
And one of these terrorists, about 19 years old, he trained in Palestine, he came back to Iran, and he attempted to assassinate my grandfather with an AR, shot him 5-6 times in his chest. My grandfather survived. The soldiers were going to kill him because they loved my grandfather. My grandfather had leniency on this guy. Anyway, the guy later winds up being like a mayor equivalent in Iran. And then he winds up getting assassinated, which is a crazy story within itself. But my grandfather fled through through Turkey. They bombed the safe house my grandfather was fleeing to. And the people that rescued my grandfather were Americans. Americans took my grandfather in, and they didn't take my grandfather in from, you would think, okay, maybe Americans were hunting my grandfather. No, it was Iranians that were hunting my grandfather. the terrorist IRGC. It took Americans to rescue my grandfather from his own homeland with this like foreign occupying cult.
Yeah.
And I'm just one of many people, man. I'm just one of many people. My grandfather would come to Washington, D.C. You know, he'd come out to like Virginia, do military exercises and such in the Washington, D.C. area. And that's, you know, it's just, they had a good cooperation with the United States, even with the military, man.
Yeah.
You know, this is in the 1970s, you know, and that's it, man. It doesn't represent the you know who we are. Unfortunately, there's some Iranians like Trita Parsi, basically an IRGC soldier. He came to the United States, man. Started, you know, they got this NIAC, and they've infiltrated. They don't love America like the majority of Iranians do, man. No. And they can confuse Americans. Not everyone understands it like you, bro. You know.
Yeah. Well, I've been very fortunate because one of the first things I did was over almost exactly 20 years ago, I studied for 18 months Persian Parsi, and I studied under Persian instructors who were from Iran, who almost all of them fled during the revolution. And then even today, when I live in Washington, D.C., one of my closest friends, my best friend, his family, his father was a high-ranking officer in the Air Force, in the Iranian Air Force, and he fled over the mountains into Turkey at 4 years old. And so almost every Persian that you meet has a story like this. I actually went on a ski trip with him and his 4 other Persian buddies who were all from LA. And we went to Salt Lake City, and the entire time they just shared all the different stories, and all of them had different stories of how they fled the country. And so, they all share not only these stories, but they share their love for this country. And it's really amazing, especially like my hairstylist is Persian. You know, I'm so inundated. It's so involved within the Persian community in DC. And it's just, I've had the rare opportunity to not only see the great side of it, but through professionally, I've seen what the other side looks like. And I know what they're fighting for.
Yeah. And I can't wait to, so we're about to get into this, guys. We're going to go over to Joe Kent on Shawn Ryan, just get like a fact check from someone who's actually, you know, in the special operations doing this sort of stuff actually overseas. So yeah, man, I just one question here. So, you know, you did special ops in the Middle East. Where did you learn? If you could tell me in Farsi, maybe, you know, like where did you learn?
Yeah. Man dar salate dozar shish dar alati California Farsi yad gereftam Poroye yek salonim.
That's pretty good, man.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. So you learned in California, huh? About a year.
Yeah.
It's a year and a half. That's cool, man.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool, man.
Yeah.
That was pretty
well,
cool.
I will caveat this. So I learned very proper Farsi. So if you wanted to talk about nuclear proliferation treaties, we can have that discussion. But the second you start throwing anything colloquial, street, anything like that, I struggle. You know, so I'll be completely honest. I could read and write, but you know, if it's anything outside of what you read in a newspaper, I definitely struggle.
Nice, man. That's nice, man. That's pretty cool, man. That's hats off, man, to your professionalism.
Yeah.
All right, guys. So we're gonna get into this. This is Joe Kent, and he's talking about basically what's going on. Yeah, man, we could do a little bit of fact checking here. 1 second here, Joe Kent. 1 second here. All right, here we go.
Zum Glück habe ich die Wir kaufen ein Auto.de Werbung mit Ralf gesehen.
Hol dir jetzt
I got the
deinen
German.
Preis.
You know I'm in Germany, bro.
Yeah.
How to articulate thoughts into words more clearly.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, you know I'm in Germany, bro. I'm not capping.
Yeah.
All right, here
because
we
the
go.
Israelis viewed this as the prime time and Trump as the prime vehicle to use.
All right, just so everyone that's listening. So I'm about to play the Joe Kent. This is Joe Kent about 2 weeks back on Shawn Ryan's show.
for regime change in Iraq. Now, President Trump's stated policy had been, and he says this all the time, that Iran can't have a nuclear bomb. Now, the Iranians actually agreed with President Trump, and they had a prohibition, a fatwa, a religious decree on actually producing a nuclear weapon that had held since 2004. And what the Iranians did say was like, hey, we're not going to make a nuclear bomb, but we want the ability to enrich uranium, because they had seen what had taken place in Libya and Iraq. And they said, hey, if we go the Gaddafi route in Libya and say, here's all of our nuclear making material, then they're a sitting duck. Then they can be invaded and regime changed at any given time. They saw the Saddam route. If they actually pursued a weapon, or even like kind of BS'd that they had a weapon, that same thing, they would be immediately invaded. So they kind of had this ability to say, hey, we have a prohibition on a nuclear weapon, but we have some ability to enrich. This was a major threat to the Israelis' goal. So what I watched the Israelis do over the course of the last year was use their government officials engaging with our government officials, but then also their surrogates in the media, Mark Levin, who I'll talk to tonight, mainstream media, think tanks, Foundation for Defense of Democracies, a lot of talking heads on Fox News, to move the red line. So Trump had said, my red line is no nuclear weapons. The Ayatollah said, great, I don't want nuclear weapons either. Let's talk. So they moved the red line by saying enrichment. Iran can have no enrichment. Enrichment equals a nuclear weapon, which is just fundamentally not true. So that would be parroted from officials in the Israeli government and then also on the news.
I mean, let's backtrack.
Yeah.
I don't think not one of our 18 intelligence agencies had mentioned that Iran was enriching uranium, correct?
They were doing enrichment to some degree. So there was enrichment
For no nuclear weapons.
but no nuclear weapons.
No
And
nuclear
we
weapons.
knew, all 18 intelligence agencies agreed that the fatwa against actually making a nuclear weapon was holding, and the Iranians were not making a nuclear weapon. So that
Do you think that, so what do you think about that? I know you've talked
Yeah.
about this. Actually,
So actually, I'd like to preface. So I actually knew Joe Kent. I met him a couple of times. So Joe is from a Tier 1 Special Missions unit. We were actually from the same unit. And we actually worked the similar target set. So I want to put that out there. So within the intelligence community, anytime you perceive a problem, there are going to be a number of different opinions on it. So there are, and through people's different experiences, people can come up with different views. Like, because Joe has come out in not only his previous interview, but even in that later on that interview, he talks about that Iran has been a threat, whether or not it was an imminent threat, that's semantics. That's another story. So going into the fatwa, right? The fatwa, is this religious decree that we're not going to do something, right? Well, with Iran's track record, can you 100% trust that? Not really. And then also, especially a country when their motto is death to Israel and death to America, when people say stuff like this, believe them, right? You don't really you can't afford not to. And then you get into this concept of enrichment. So enrichment, there is a portion of enrichment which does allow you to get nuclear power, but you still need enrichment to get to nuclear weapons. And so there's this area, if they are doing enrichment, at what point does it stop, right? And so there was the view that, well, hey, we can let them enrich a little bit. Obviously, the Israelis like, hey, they shouldn't have any enrichment, but that is a path down to nuclear weapons. And you then have to get into like, what is the true motive of the Islamic Republic? They say they're not going to do it, but do they also have an ulterior motive to be like, hey, let's just say this for now, and then we'll get to a level of strength that they can't say no to us anymore. And so that is another side of that opinion, which is, some are like, we can at least let them enrich a little bit. And there's the other side, which is like, should we even go that route? Should we even allow them to even have some level of enrichment, which then the next step could then be along the line to nuclear weapons? And he said, he talks about the 18 agencies that, did they have a nuclear weapon? No, they didn't have a nuclear weapon, but I will go back on this. If a country like Iran, do you wait till they have a nuclear weapon, then do something about it? Or do you try to stop them prior, right? And this whole concept of threat versus imminent threat, like Al-Qaeda 2001 was considered a threat, not an imminent threat. We saw what happened on 9/11. So that's not even an argument that you can really go into versus threat versus imminent threat. But this is definitely an opinion about what is the best way to keep Iran from getting nuclear weapons. Because even Joe will admit, like, the overall end goal, do not let them have nuclear weapons. They cannot be trusted with it because of, their actions, and also, the things that they have said. And anybody who really understands the motives of the Islamic Republic knows that that's not a good idea. So then how do you do it, right? And so this is where, do you let them have it a little bit, or do you sort of take a bit of a hard line? And even with the fatwas, since Khamenei was killed and his son, who we haven't seen, Motaba, there's always been discussion is that, will he get rid of the fatwa? Which then brings up another issue, which was, how strong was the fatwa in place? If you put a fatwa, does that mean your successor is going to honor it? No, that doesn't mean. So this line of thinking isn't, you really can't rely on it. So that's where I fundamentally disagree, especially when it comes to fatwas. And there is an argument about at what point do you allow them any sort of enrichment. And I think with their track record, I think it's very dangerous to give them any sort of leeway.
I mean, the thing is, bro, is if we didn't attack Iran, right? Like if we just left the IRGC in, even if it's not an imminent threat, and then let's say AOC is the president next, or someone that's going to pander to the IRGC. And let's say during that administration, the CCP attacks Taiwan. I mean, it's just sort of like, and that's more years that they're going to censor us. That's more years they're going to pump this disinformation to our schools, podcasts, media, buy out our politicians. I mean, they've run such successful psyops. The fact that they have already gotten the right to split with such success, and they took no risk because they outlawed our free speech in Qatar, in communist China. So they go on just complete offense on us by weaponizing our free speech. And if we don't flip Iran and take this country and make it a great American ally, similar to, let's say, Israel, why, do we really want to give it away to communist China? Because China's literally helping IRGC kill Americans, bro.
Yeah.
It's that black or white to me, or like however they spin it, it's that black or white. I mean, I don't.
So what I would say, and I would highlight, is I think if you want to judge a country's character, look at what they do to their own people. So if the Iranian people has no problem with killing with tens and thousands of its own people, imagine what it would do to its enemies. So, that right there is a highlighted issue. And I actually think that the Iranian people, if the Islamic Republic was overturned and, you were able to, some sort of a democratically elected government, I think that the Iranian people would actually become an even stronger ally to the United States than even Israel is, because I actually think that we, in a lot of ways, share actually more values with the Iranian people than we do with the Israelis in certain aspects.
Wow. Yeah, man. I mean, it's whatever comes is definitely better than IRGC. I mean, we literally have it's not hard to beat that.
Yeah. And I understand the frustrations, especially with the Iranians, the Persians, that they would love for us to assist in whatever way possible to make this happen. Unfortunately, it's not that easy for the Americans, right? We are the one nation who, I think, combination of, luckily we have the most amount of power within the world, but we also have, luckily, I would say, the highest moral code of any country militarily, because outside of really any other country, we try to avoid civilian casualties to our own detriment. And we generally try to help out the injustices of the world. Obviously, we try to do them when they align with our political agenda, which unfortunately changes between administrations and can even change even in more short term than that. But we can't put boots on the ground in our current political state, which is unfortunate, because we spent that capital in Iraq. It would be political suicide for this administration. And the best way to do it is obviously to help the Iranian people do it. But the IRGC is extremely embedded, not only militarily, but in their own economic structure. The IRGC has been, its biggest risk is the Artesh, and for years, and they know this, they're not stupid, so they've been putting as much IRGC loyalists into the Artesh to help control the Artesh. So at what point do you obviously we do something similar to special operations advisors, how we helped Afghanistan, the Taliban fight the Soviet Union in the 80s. But that's really hard because of how effective the RGC is. The besiege, takes no prisoners whatsoever. So unfortunately, it's not an easy sell. It won't be easy. And then even if we were to come in and do boots on the ground, then there would be a question of legitimacy of that government, because they'd be like, oh, well, the United States just installed it, right? So it's this really hard, you do one way versus the other. I think in the end, it would be better if the Iranians, and we help them to take back their country. But it's definitely going to be much harder in that path.
All right. Here we go. Going to go back here. Joe Kent. He's the guy that was in charge of counterterrorism in Washington, and he left the Trump team. And then he was, I know you have your own view on this, but my view is he shouldn't have disrespected President Trump the way he did. Yeah. I think this is unprofessional,
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
Tulsi Gabbard testified to that last year. She just testified to it again this year, that the Iranians, under the previous supreme leader who was just killed, now the Iranians more than likely are going to change their strategic outlook. That's my guess. My guess is like, hey, a lot of their hardliners are now saying, hey, do you see what this moderation got us? And now they're going to attempt to buy one or spread. That's just my guess. But for the last year, prior to this last conflict kicking off, we did not assess that they were trying to make a nuclear weapon. So that's why they had to move the red line and say enrichment. And so finally, through official engagements and the media continuing to echo this, they basically got the U.S. talking point to change, that Iran could not have any kind of nuclear enrichment. And that was a non-starter for the Iranians. And that's how we basically got into the 12-day war, Operation Midnight Hammer. Again, 12-day war launched by the Israelis. We said, hey, we're going to come in, we're going to do a series of limited strikes to take away any nuclear capability that Iran may have. And then we're done. Now, at the time, we had seen, myself and others had seen how aggressive the Israelis were about wanting regime change inside Iran. And so when Midnight Hammer and the lead up to it, we assessed that, hey, even if we did these strikes, the Israelis were going to come right back to us after a couple months and say, no, now is the time for us to do regime change. And that's exactly what happened. The difference is we had robust debates in the lead up to Midnight Hammer. After Midnight Hammer, President Trump's decision-making circle was very, very tight. And that's his prerogative. He can do that. However, he had all pro-Israel hawks like really in his ear: Lindsey Graham, Ted Cruz. And then on the outside, again, the media echo chamber, knowing that President Trump was watching Fox News, knowing what media he was consuming, and they're all saying the same thing: Iran can't have any enrichment, which basically put us on this collision course towards a conflict. I think the Israelis once again got nervous about a month ago, because they knew that Witkoff and Kushner and others in the administration were actively engaging with the Iranians to get a deal. And that's why the Israelis launched their attack, knowing they could force our hands. And that's why I think you saw Marco Rubio and others come out immediately and say, well, yeah, there was an imminent attack. And the imminent attack was the Israelis attacking the Iranians. And then we knew that they would retaliate back against us.
Why would they
what do you think about that?
So there's a lot of things to unpack here. So first of all, going back to the whole enrichment thing, we kind of touched on earlier, like that's just a slippery slope. And that's just a matter of opinion. And I think that there's a lot of people, there's people that show Joe's opinion, which, we should at least allow them to have, enrichment to where they can create like nuclear power. But then there's a lot of people who also we just don't trust them. We just don't trust them to stop there. Right. And through previous administrations, anytime that we've tried to control their nuclear program has never really worked. But then going into the part where he starts talking about Tulsi Gabbard and then the circle that he's surrounding him, I'm just in a firm belief that any leader, you should always have opposing ideas. You should not just staff yourself with people who share all the exact same opinions on things. Like you that's why you want a cabinet that has multiple levels and multiple different types of experience. So you should always have somebody who's like, okay, we're pro for this. You have your pro interventionist, but also have your pro isolationist. That way you can bounce ideas off this particular situation. And the only part that I kind of agree is just the concept of having sort of this full spectrum advisors, where you have people who want you to exercise caution, and then other people who don't want you to exercise caution. They want you to be bold. And I think one of the strengths that Trump has had during engagements, whether it was doing strikes to kill Qasem Soleimani in 2020 or the strikes at Midnight Hammer, things like that, is his ability to move laterally, freely, left or right. He's not stuck into one thing. He can act boldly. He can act unpredictably, which is sort of creates its own deterrent, which is why Iran's proxies pretty much went docile during Trump's administration this time. So it's, going into this concept that, what do you do in this particular situation? And then like, oh, are we aggravating them? And we may touch on this later. They're like, if we strike, we're going to aggravate the government. And then they even made a comment later on that the Iranians would actually unite under the Iranian flag, and which I also disagree with. I think that the majority of the population of Iran wants this regime done, wants them gone. And it's just really hard to trust anything that they have, say, or do. And it's only just a matter of time. And I'll give you a parallel to like the Russians. If you look at both military actions around Ukraine, they did this essentially around Trump's. When you have somebody in office who is not going to do anything, whether it's Obama or Biden, that's when Russia chose to take action. And so it's not a huge surprise that during Trump's administration that the IRGC has sort of went quiet, laying low until whoever's next, like let's just say Gavin Newsom, AOC gets in there. Do you think the IRGC is going to stay docile? Are they going to stay down? I don't think that they will. And there's a lot of people who have shared this opinion, and there's also people who share Joe's opinion. So, so I think it's a difficult subject, but I personally don't think you can trust Iran with nuclear enrichment or a possibility of getting weapons.
If the IRGC in Iran is laying low, like you said, what are they preparing for?
I think that they're preparing. I'll give it another example. So if you look at the buildup of the IRGC and a lot of the forces, their ballistic missile program, their drone program, their Navy has been during Obama and Biden's administrations. So they've been gaining power to the point where we actually predicted that within 10 years, they would probably be too powerful for us to really stop them without going to a full-on conventional war with them. So, and this kind of comes back to the issue where people bring up that Israel led us into this war, right? Did the strikes through Israel have something to do with when we actually took action? Yes, it did. But it still didn't change the fact that this was actually part of our eventual plan, because we didn't want them to reach a sort of a level of terminal velocity as far as power goes, to where we could no longer stop them. So I believe that the Trump administration used this as an opportunity to essentially put them back 5 or 10 years until we can kind of figure out what, and also sort of give an opening to the Iranian people, and just at the same time weaken the Islamic regime. But then you also run into another issue as you're decapitating the leaders of the Islamic Republic. You always run the risk of people who are even worse taking their place. This has happened in so many different countries and so many different dictatorships and authoritarian regimes. But eventually, the idea is you'll kill enough of them that their own basic human need for survival will kick in and be like, hey, you know what? We'll stop what we're doing. I'd like to live. So I think that is definitely a factor to consider when analyzing this whole situation.
So when you were doing on these special ops teams, for example, if you were there right now and you were running special ops, what would you already be doing that civilians there wouldn't understand?
So a couple of different things we would be doing. So if we were trying to overthrow the Islamic Republic without putting boots on the ground, what we would be trying to do is setting up as many contacts and sources that we have within not only the opposition groups, but mainly the actual Artesh, and also people within probably who we think within the civilian population could help as well. And then, because one of the issues right now is the Iranian people is they have a lack of communications because they shut down the internet. And what level of Starlink, they're confiscating all the terminals. So it's really hard for them to coordinate, which is obviously if you were sitting in the RGC shoes and you wanted to stop your people from rising up, one of the things you can do is they can't coordinate this revolution. You're going to take away their levels of communication. So you would be in there trying to find people who could sort of lead a revolution behind all the different large units within the Artesh that spread throughout the country, the opposition groups, if you can get them to cooperate, which that's a whole nother issue unto itself, and then coordinate sort of a coordinated revolution. And we would be doing that, but not only giving air cover, which obviously we've established, but communications and advisors to help the people not only communicate, but help them to coordinate and plan these coordinated attacks throughout the country. Because I think that's what will be required to take down the IRGC and the besiege.
Do you, and I mean, and another part of it is also that, like you said earlier, they've infiltrated so much that it's like as soon as someone gets on any sort of communication, they can find you, man.
Yeah. So, and that's definitely one of the difficulties because most communication networks are essentially have a land-based central system, like your internet, everything like that. The few things that don't are types of satellite communications, which obviously they've tried to, but obviously the military, and we always have civilian versions of this, where we have communications that are not linked or not based within a network that the government can control. And that's the type of communication devices and networks that would need to be established to do this sort of coordinated effort through a revolution.
All right, guys, I'm going to go back in here, getting fact checks from a former tier 1 special ops operator. If you're allowed to tell me, what countries did you serve in the Middle East?
I served all over the world. I was in the Middle East a lot. I was in, let's just say, around Iran, very close. And I spent a lot of time in Africa, Europe, Asia, South America. I basically, anywhere there was possible Iranian influence, I was there, which is almost every single continent. They obviously have people know about their proxies, which is where they put majority of their effort, but they're also kind of taking a page out of China's playbook, which is find anybody and everybody who's not the biggest fan of the United States or Israel and try to befriend them in some sort of a way, whether it's providing money or some sort of other access or just some other sort of aid that they can in order to, at the longer down the road, maybe help them out in their strategic goals against us in Israel.
I feel like sort of like the bottleneck here, like when you look at what's going on in Lebanon and IDF, very brave men, very creative, a lot of valor. I mean, they just, undisputed. They're winning, a lot. And they, like the way that they have knocked out Hezbollah, to the point where these guys don't have communications. They're afraid. They had that Zoom meeting situation where, they basically traced the location. So now they got Hezbollah in a situation where they truly have to like communicate, let's say, by carrier. And then that poses its own risk, for example, aerial attack from like, say, a drone or whatever, right? But so if they got Hezbollah on defense, now I'm saying this to say, now you look at Iran, to your earlier point, you're talking about they can't communicate. So like if they can't communicate, okay, so if the Iranians that are unarmed cannot communicate, how the heck do they get out of this?
And that is a really good question. And that's one of the reasons why this is such a difficult situation. We would have to provide that level of communication, or there is a possibility for a sort of hack. If the United States could hack into the current Iranian like communications hubs, it controls the internet, everything like that. There is a possibility. I'm not quite sure of what current capabilities, because I haven't been involved in that particular field in a number of years. But if you could, hypothetically, if you were going to coordinate a series of attacks where you were able to help the Iranian people, the Artesh and the opposition groups to make this coordinated attack, you would probably combine it with American airstrikes and probably a cyber attacks to not only reopen communications for the rest of the Iranian people, but also at the same time try to shut down the communications for the IRGC.
So I did a video, and I did a video. Other Iranian Americans did a video who love America. Okay, and they love you, and they want to, and they love Iran. They want Iran freed. They made videos, including myself, to say, "Hey, President Trump, we're Iranian American men. We are ready to go enlist and go fight." Like, and when I think about it, it's just like here in Germany, there were American soldiers that were German American. They came here to Germany and they fought the Germans. And I used to always wonder, like, how the heck did they do that? Because I'm Jewish. Also, there's a friend of mine. He's Italian, Irish, and he has a podcast. And we had lunch or dinner once, and he said something like this to me. He was like, "I'd go fight Italy. And I'm Italian. I identify as Italian American. I love America. But if we went to go fight war with Italy, I would go." And I thought to myself, okay, would I go fight Israel? Would I go fight Israel? Or would I serve America? And there's this dual loyalty question. Would I go fight Iran? There's this dual loyalty question. I think if we're honest, everyone in the United States has that, because other than the Native Americans, right? Yeah. And there's a precedent for what I'm saying, because here in Germany, Americans bombed the heck out of this place. We still have, like, I don't know, you know much better than me, but like if I ever meet an American in Germany, a lot of these guys that are gals that I meet in Germany, they're generally either in defense or in the military.
Yeah.
Okay. And especially if you go down toward Frankfurt and that part of Germany, like not too far from Heidelberg, Klauserslautern, Ramstein, you know what I'm talking about. So the thing is, man, is that, like, okay, so you were in the military, you did special ops. Why do you think Trump, or do you think he would say, hey, you know what? I'll take 10,000 Iranian American men. We'll put them in 1 month of boot camp or 2 weeks of specialized training.
Yeah.
And if they want to volunteer and go, they can volunteer and go and at least help with the communication situation of what you just said.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think? Is this feasible, or would we pretty much all get slaughtered? I mean, I don't know.
Well, one, I want to point out, so the video you actually talked about was that, I don't know if you remember, it's actually the video how I found your channel.
Wow.
And I reached out to you when I saw you're essentially like, hey, me and I think like 2,000 of my friends we're ready to go into war. And I actually commented on that video and I sent you a message that I really liked it.
Thanks.
So there's a couple different layers of this. So one, if you were going to fulfill that role as advisors, we have learned time and time again, it's better for people who have been trained in that specific job and actually have a bit of a small footprint. Because the second you have, like, let's say you were to infiltrate 10,000, we'll call them the free companies of America, the Iranians, right? You would have a big footprint, and then the IRGC would know where you're at, and they would send troops. And then you then get into the situation where we have 10,000 Iranian Americans, even though they volunteered. We, as you can see, how much effort we went into rescuing a single F-15 pilot. And what I think was one of our greatest strengths, we don't leave any man behind. And if we had put 10,000 in there, the IRGC alone is 160,000. How many of the Artesh would be involved in that counter military movement? You have the besieged. Even combined with air power, that would be there would be a bit of an issue. We would then have to commit even more troops then, because we wouldn't just let 10,000 Iranian Americans die. It's not within we just wouldn't do that, right? So if you're going to fulfill that role, you want a small footprint, so that way you can get around without them not knowing you're there and doing what you're doing. But then also, all these people within that roles have been doing that particular job for 5-10 years, if not more, because it is a very difficult and specialized job. Is there a case if we were to go and have some sort of conventional conflict? I think that would be an awesome idea. I think that would rally people, be like, hey, we're overt about it. We're like, hey, we're going to go to this conventional conflict. All the Iranian Americans, if you want to sign up, almost maybe like a French Foreign Legion. We're like, hey, you want to join up? You're not even Iranian Americans. We'll put you in. I think that I don't know if that's ever been done at that scale in American history. May have been. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it would be kind of cool. And I think even when I had messaged you, right, I think what you're kind of looking at more of an Iranian version of the Inglourious Bastards. I think that would be more tangible, but that would have to be at smaller scale.
Not for nothing. I feel like, let's say 10,000 Iranian Americans would volunteer to go join and fight the IRGC in Iran. I feel like there's a lot of Jewish men that would do it. And I think there's a lot of just American guys in the South that hate terrorists. I think they would do it. I think there's a lot of people. I think there's enough that we would have at least 25,000 guys, man. And if one last thing. And in my mind, I'd say, man, we go through like Azerbaijan or Armenia, and we go straight to Tehran, bro. Like we just lock that out. Like, we just go in there and we just go right in.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know the practicality of that like you do.
Yeah. Well, so one, I love the idea of, because there are a lot of Americans, like I just did the Into the Breach podcast with a guy named Ethan Nagel, and he's a former Marine Scout sniper, and him and a couple buddies, they went to Ukraine, and a number of Americans who went to go help Ukraine. And there's a lot of Americans, even former military, who would sign back up, or even ones who were in, who would easily join or would want to go on that mission, which is to help the Iranian people, because most Americans, or at least a large portion, love the idea that we are helping people out there, who are not us, because I think that that's one of the things that builds that American culture, is that we want to help people who are, the injustices, the people who can't help themselves, right? Like that's kind of our job within this world. And there's a lot of people who believe that. There's people who don't. I get it. But to sort of coordinate that sort of, I think I love the idea. it would be difficult. There is some practical restraints because even if you were to train people and they just go to basic training, it is very hard to fight in those type of environments, because if you were to take 25,000 troops, right, and you were to go into Tehran, well, there's more than 25,000 Iranian Islamic Republic loyal security forces in Tehran, and that would be a city fight. This would turn into Leningrad, Ramadi, a lot of it would be very bloody. And for Americans as a government and a military, for us to do that, we would, if we chose to do that, I guarantee you we would go full blast. It would be full turn on conventional war. We would send everybody, we would send divisions, we would coordinate attacks everywhere in the country. Just to send 25,000, it's just even that. It's just not how we would do things, because one, that type of combat is, well, one, combat in general is not fun. Like, anybody who's actually been to war would never actually nobody wants war, right? It is a necessary evil or a necessary thing that you have to do. But I, like myself, if I was given the chance and like, hey, we're sending you in with like a group of, like a team of like 20 Iranians, I'd say like, hell yeah, sign me up. Like I'm all for it. And I know a lot of people would be, but unfortunately, a large conventional coordinated effort is more complicated, and it would require Trump to give the full send, the carte blanche to the entire operation, very much how we invaded Iraq in 2003.
Do you think the actual war right now with Iran is fought by, soldiers, or do you think it's by like the 1% that do like the invincible operations similar to what you did?
Yeah, if I had to guess, the people who would, if there were any in Iran, they would be your highest level special operations and probably your intelligence agency type folk who are in there trying to develop context. Because even before this conflict, they would have already been there. And because we've been planning for this for decades, we've had people in there since the Shah's time, and we have people there, the Israelis have people there, and we're constantly always trying to get ourselves the best foothold. If one day we did choose to do that, we would do that. So I guarantee you, when this Operation Epic Fury, a lot of these strikes, especially that happened on day one where Khomeini was killed, that there were assets on the ground confirming locations of those particular targets, which is one of the reasons why that strike was so effective. And those people are still out there trying to do what they can, because at the end of the day, you prepare for a conflict that may or may not happen. That, at the end of the day, that is the administration, that is the president's say. But until then, the rest of us, we work as if one day we will get that launch, that go. And so we're constantly always working, no matter what's going on in the White House.
When you say you were a tier 1 special ops, operator, does that mean something like Navy SEALs or Delta Force or Marine Recon? Like what?
Something. So I was in a tier 1 special missions unit that specializes in intelligence. So I would be very similar to kind of like what would be the Army's version of the CIA, was the unit that I was in. And I would be one of the people who would be on the ground in plain clothing in places, where there are no military assets, planning and developing sources and assets. And if we were ever to do a military strike or, have special operations guys come in and do some sort of, attack, raid, kidnapping, I'd be the type of people who are there trying to enable that, or also countering Iranian intelligence assets. So if they go places, we counter them and trying to essentially, you can call it back a little word, for lack of better words, spy games against our adversaries and intelligence organizations.
Bro, I have this theory that there are recognizable people, and the bad guys, let's call them bad guys. The bad guys are trying to get this recognizable character. And then there's good guys. And then the good guys know that the bad guys are after this person. And the good guys can completely crush these bad guys. And then that one person never even finds out that he actually had good guys that were actually tracking him the same way the bad guys were tracking him. Is that just like in a movie, or do you think that's real?
Well, with everything in movies, I will tell you this: there is some kernel of truth within there, right? What the movies usually do is they'll take a concept, which that very much might be true. They'll kind of make it sexier. They'll make it like better to watch on television, because most, even your Delta Force and your SEAL Team 6 guys who like that's their job is to do the sexy stuff. 99% of the time, they're just sitting around training, waiting for that opportunity, putting themselves in places, like getting ready to strike, but then they don't get the permission to do it. And there's a lot of people out there in this world who are still alive to this day, didn't know that they were under the scope of some sort of Western special forces, special operations, who was just waiting to pull the trigger, had them locked, had them ready to go. And then that just particular administration or whoever was in the command just did not give that go, and then had to essentially leave. So that happens more often than not. Like, there are people out there doing the operations, putting themselves in places, preparing for situations where they might get permission, and just waiting to get that permission. And a lot of times we don't get that permission, but we still do the job. We still get there. We still prepare, and we still continue access to who we believe are targets.
So all right. So then another question here is like, before we go back to this Joe Kent thing, when you go overseas and you go into one of these countries, like, do you just generally go there for like would you just go to a hostile country and then you just take one backpack? You're there for 3 weeks. What?
It's more complicated than that. So no, typically, if you go into these places and you are trying to enable access, develop sources, you are going to be there for quite a while, months. It's an enduring effort, if you will, because these things don't happen overnight. You have to build relationships, and also you have to deal with anytime that you're in the country, especially if you're someone who looks like me, because I don't blend in very well in those areas. You have to, as soon as you get into those countries, the intelligence, the domestic intelligence services of those countries are going to be looking at you as a potential threat. Like, this could be someone who is an operative, and you have to essentially lull them to sleep to thinking that you're a normal person, that you're not there to do nefarious activity. So there's this whole game, if you will, that you have to play, which is to lull them to sleep, but also do your job.
If the CIA and the Mossad are always preparing, how close are we to something bigger in Iran?
Well, I think that it's one thing that we like to do is have every option available to us. So at any point, the option of invading Iran and doing a full conventional war send like we did in Iraq in 2003 has always been on the table. Obviously, there's a lot more to consider in this particular issue, especially when it comes to American politics. At what point do you take military action if it's going to essentially possibly commit political suicide for Donald Trump and the Republican Party? Which it could or could not. But that's something that has to be considered. Like, you have to take that into consideration. But I think the important thing is those options are always there. And let's just take an example of why the 2,500 Marines of the FAST, I'm going to butcher this. It's either a brigade, whatever, the 2,500 Marines that went to the area, and then you have the 82nd Airborne Division, right? You go to that area, and they're there because for two reasons. One, just in case you might want to escalate to that. Two, it's a bargaining chip. So one thing that Donald Trump does very well, and if you at this point you're surprised by his comments, by his hyperbolic vernacular, he says outlandish things to get people to come to the negotiating table. Like, for example, when he said the other evening that he was going to wipe out entire civilization, anybody at this point who believed that Donald Trump was going to wipe out entire civilization does not understand what Donald Trump does, right? He talks about invading Greenland, right? That was never his goal. That's not how he does. He wrote a book called The Art of the Deal. It explains his negotiation tactics. I feel like as a president, he uses a combination of the Art of the Deal and the Sun Tzu's Art of War. So they are there to remind Iran, I can escalate this further. You need to come to the negotiation table, right? And I know that there's a bunch of people who, especially the Iranians, who don't want to see him coming to the negotiation table. He wants to escalate it to full conventional war because that's probably what it's going to require for the Islamic Republic to fall this time. So, yeah.
So what do you think right now? The IRGC is scared. Do you think they're collapsing? I mean, they got a lot of economic issues. It looks like
they do.
Yeah.
They do, and we've seen reporting coming out that they're on. They do this all the time, right? They will come out and say, "Hey, we're not phased. We're the ones winning this war." Like with the whole issues concerning the Strait of Hormuz, like they're claiming that Lebanon should have been a part of the deal. We're like, it's not. They're like, well, we actually won this war, so we get to bill every ship that's coming into the Strait of Hormuz. Like that alone, them saying that is them projecting this level of delusion. It's not necessarily delusion, but it's them. This is propaganda. They're like, hey, you're not affecting us. But when we actually see reporting that they're on the verge of economic collapse, and there are moderates within the country, within the government, even in the IRGC, who are like, hey, let's make a deal. Because if they completely collapse, then that also is another avenue for the revolution of the Iranian people for 2026 to happen. So they're between a rock and a hard place, but they keep wanting this sort of old school, like Soviet Union hardline sort of statements that they're making that they're doing just fine, but when we know that they're not. So there are people within the government who, even the RGC, who are probably like, they don't care. Like they'd rather see the whole country burn than give up their power. But then there's moderates who are like, hey, let's make a deal. We're not going to survive this.
So you did special ops. You faced Iran face to face in the Middle East. You're familiar with Unit 400, right? It's like the most secret Iranian. If you could please tell me what is that?
So they are the wing of the art. So they are. So first, you have to break out what the Codes Force is. The Codes Force is a unit, an organization within the IRGC, but actually operates almost independently from the IRGC. The Codes Force commander, who used to be Qasem Soleimani, the infamous terror mastermind, the commander of the Codes Force actually has a direct line to the supreme leader. He actually doesn't technically really have to go through the normal IRGC leadership. He actually has an avenue where he can go directly to him. They are the external operation. And so within the Codes Force, you have Department 400, which is the external operations arm of the Codes Force. And let me back this up. The Codes Force is sort of Iran's combination of intelligence and special forces. So if you were to like put your special forces and your CIA into one organization, that's what the Codes Force is. Department 400 is specifically their external operations arm, where they do operations where they control the proxies, and they do direct sort of operations against Iran's enemies and the enemies of their proxies.
You know, this is a little bit of an offbeat question. I've noticed that out of the Iranians that speak up, I feel like the women get the most death threats, man. You know, like
Yeah.
I feel like they truly, man, like they truly get terrorized. And one thing I heard Dan Bongino say once, he said something like, I think it might have been Dan Bongino, I'm not sure. It was someone, it might have been. And he said he asked the correctional officer who worked in like this prison, tough prison. And he's like, I guess he asked the prisoner, this guy asked the prisoner, he's like, how do you pick which correctional officer you're going to attack? And the prisoner said something like, I go after the one that I think is the easiest to take down. And I think that for that reason, the Iranian women, Middle Eastern women who speak up against these vile beasts who attack teenage girls, rape teenage girls, and they can't complain or they get attacked. They openly rape, and I just think that, in my theory, is that they're not as likely to go after an Iranian American that's strapped, that trains in hand-to-hand combat, maybe has some law enforcement or military background, who would actually hunt them down. Like I feel like if you are going to go after someone, you're going to put a lot of pressure on the woman. I don't know. That's just my theory, man, because I'll tell you something, man. I feel like the women that I know, they're getting fucking chased, bro. I ain't like for speaking up. It's bad. And I've seen how they've gone through it. That's why I think when an Iranian woman speaks up, any Middle Eastern woman speaks up, I just think that they're just so brave, because they even when they log off, bro, when they log off the podcast, when they get out, like I just had the podcast guest I had last night. She's famous actress, and she's in India. She's Iranian though. She's in India, and she literally has police that are protecting her. It's that bad.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know. Could you tell me you studied intelligence? I mean, is that accurate? Not accurate? What do you think?
No, it actually is completely accurate. And I will, first of all, I will say that the women that speak up, especially people who come from Islamic cultures, or countries that are run by Islamic theocratic governments, they are so brave for a number of reasons. So there's two parts to this, and you actually hit on this perfectly, because that there was another sort of investigation. There was a guy who investigated, or he wrote about, he interviewed one of the most notorious and prevalent child molester rapists in U.S. history, and he interviewed him while I think he was on death row, and he asked him, how did you choose your targets? And he said he would look at the father, and he was like, if the father of that kid looked tough, I wouldn't go anywhere near him. I picked the weak ones. So that is something that every predator has done in the history of mankind. They pick people who they think they can get away with. And this is exacerbated twofold within the Islamic world, because they already don't consider women to be, almost like they're second-class citizens. Like they don't have the same value as men, which is a whole nother set of issues with.
Did you see that though? When you were undercover in the Middle East, did you see that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The way that women are treated just within the Islamic world is definitely one of the issues, especially the ones who speak out. This was always a big issue in Afghanistan. This has obviously been a big issue in Iran, and a lot of the really countries that kind of really hold their religion as part of their governmental law. The non-secular,
How about pedophilia? I'm sorry.
That's also a big issue. Obviously, in that part of the world, especially places like Afghanistan, the pedophilia actually crosses into boys as well, which is also, this is just a whole nother issue into itself. But they see that for them, rape there isn't even an age. Like, they will rape women of all ages, old, young, kids, it doesn't matter. And that's one of the things that I personally, I can't abide. And I know this about what's going on over there currently. Like, I know that the women that they have caught by the moral police over there, what they do to them. And it's absolutely disgusting. And just like, that's one of the reasons why, if I was ever given the call, like, hey, do you want to go back in? I do it. I wouldn't even hesitate.
Were there situations where you were undercover in the Middle East and you literally looked at pedophilia, or a guy was getting away with doing harm to a child, or did you, and you just couldn't do anything because you'd blow your cover?
We saw this in Afghanistan with there was a term for it. I don't know, they were called like Haji boys or something like that. But we knew it was going on, and we did not have permission to stop it.
What were
in
they
certain
doing?
cases.
How old were the boys?
10, 12, maybe younger. It's something that they do in Afghanistan. Like, anybody who wants to look up what Afghanistan boys, what's done to them by the men within that culture, it's pretty sickening.
Would you hear them scream, or like, were you like that?
We were
close?
never that close. If honestly, if we were in the position, I guarantee you, we as Americans, we heard that, like, we knew of it going on, never really actually witnessed it myself, not directly, but I guarantee you, most of us Americans, especially the soft guys, if we heard it or were in it, we probably would have stopped it regardless of orders.
You think it's true that Iranian girls are getting raped right now in Iran?
I think that you look at any situation across the entire, from Israel, Gaza, Lebanon, it happens time and time again. There are within the Islamic religion, things can be twisted, and they can find justification through their religion to why they can rape. And that's one of the dangers, I think, with religions in general, not just Islam, because a lot of people they will twist words with the Bible, the Quran, and they will find ways to sort of give a religious justification to do some of the evils that they want to as predators. But it definitely happens. It's kind of pretty widespread in these the countries where Islam is definitely a center, a part of that government. So I have seen reporting that it does happen, and we've seen reports of it coming. What little does come out of the country, especially in the last couple months, that it is happening.
How about the Christian kids? Did you ever find, when you were overseas, did you ever find Christian kids in these Muslim countries? And if so, how are they treated?
So a lot of these countries, and obviously some of these are dependent, and it depends on what group you run into, but there's a level of hatred towards anybody who's either not Muslim, or you could just be appeared as a Westerner. I think, like, some of the times that, like, especially if you look white, I don't even think they even ask what religion you practice. They will just capture you and just assume you're not Muslim. But then there are the people who could look like they're Islamic, and then they find out that they're not. Because I know there's a big issue with them finding, people who are Jewish, who, like Iranian Jews. Like, if they were to get a hold of someone who's Iranian, they're Jewish, that's pretty much a death sentence, especially in certain parts of the world. So there's definitely dangers of either just being white, or having that Western look, like you either look European, or especially if you look American. That's definitely, when you're over there, that's definitely a danger you have to take consideration. And then also, if you're a part of that culture, but then they find out that you're not Muslim, that definitely, depending on which group is in charge in that particular area, whether it's a terrorist group or it's a militia, you have to be extremely careful because some of them will kill all non-Muslims, like ISIS did and other organizations like that.
I think a lot of like my trolls or not just trolls, but probably like just straight up propagandists, they'll try to discredit me to Iranians and say that I'm Israeli.
Yeah.
I'm not Iranian.
Yeah.
And they go to the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi supporters and they tell them I'm IRGC. And then they go tell, if I'm engaging in domestic or anything having to do with the United States, they tell American Trump supporters, let's say, which, because I have a lot of Trump supporters. I personally supported Trump, I'm independent actually, man. I'm not Republican or Democrat, but I hope Trump does a fantastic job,
Yeah.
And they'll tell, Trump guys, I'm Israel first. I'm not an American. My loyalty is to Israel. I'm Assad. And I just find it like, to me, I'm like, if anyone with a little bit of common sense would say, if he was actually in one of these agencies, maybe he would actually be in Iran and he wouldn't be so high profile. Like I'm fucking like, I would be the worst agent, bro. Cause I'm like, it's so obvious what I am.
No,
I'm not even hiding it.
Yeah.
I'm not even hiding it, bro. Like,
no,
I'm just a guy making content.
Yeah. Well, if you look at, so one, we already know that there are Israeli operatives, and the ones that there are that from Iran, they're in Iran. Like, if you were an Israeli operative, what good are you doing in Germany? Right? Like, and and look,
the game is actually there.
No, and if anybody really understands how the Mossad and the Israeli operations are done, they're not subtle, right? If they have a source inside Iran, obviously they're going to be subtle for a little bit, but Israel is not subtle in how they do things. They are not all they're unapologetic, and you would not anywhere fit within their scheme of how they do operations at all, 100%. But you go into this concept because this is everywhere. Outside of this, like if you're a Republican, right? Let's just say that you're a moderate who has slightly conservative values, and you say anything that, let's just say you say anything against Trump, you're automatically a like left-wing shill. If you say anything pro-Trump, everybody on the left is like, well, you're pretty much hard right fascist Nazi, right? It's just that's but yeah, we have to remember that most people sit somewhere in the middle. Like most of us have some level of common sense, critical thinking, but unfortunately the people who are the loudest, partly because they're stupid and they have nothing else better to do, are the trolls, because they lack intelligence. And the only thing they can do is come out and say these baseless comments. And most people, who actually have that level of common sense, too busy to even bother with that BS. And so I think that's what we end up hearing most of the time, is we hear the idiots on both sides of the table. Because I'm in the middle, always have been. I'm a moderate, and I personally like what currently Trump is doing. I was actually prepared to vote for Tulsi Gabbard in 2020 when she was running as a Democrat. So, but one of my favorite quotes that I always remember, that I always try to tell people, is never argue with stupid people, because they'll bring you down to their level and they beat you with their experience. So I just don't even bother.
Yeah, I love that, man. Someone told me something. He was like, never argue something not too different, not too far from what you said. It was like, don't argue with the smaller accounts, because they always win.
Yep.
Engage, they win. So to some point, I sort of have to take the smears, slander, because I'm sort of in a situation where I just have to take it. And it's going to be the same with you, man. So here's a question. Do America and Israel really trust Pakistan in this mediation? You were undercover. You've been overseas, special ops. What do you think?
So we don't really trust anybody. I'll be completely honest. Outside of like, I'll give an example. We don't even 100% trust Israel. Not because we don't we never think that Israel will ever attack us or anything like that. But Israel spies on us. We tell them not to. We catch them all the time. We don't really trust anybody who's not us, right? We keep people at a certain distance. There's certain countries we probably keep a little bit closer, like England, Australia, members of the Five Eyes. But it's that level of healthy skepticism that you need to when dealing at the political level and especially at the intelligence level. So if Pakistan has offered to barter a truce, right, we are going to allow them to go down that avenue and we will support it. But at the same time, we don't put all of our cards in that thing. We're preparing for it to fail, right? And so that's what we do is we prepare for 10, 15, 20 different contingencies, which is one of the reasons why we're so good at what we do is we try to look and prepare for everything. And that's the level of our agencies, intelligence, scope, special operations, how we look at things. Our strength is because we look at everything. We try to game every type of scenario that could come out of this. So if somebody who don't necessarily trust, especially someone like Pakistan, wants to barter something, that fits within our political objectives and we'll allow that sort of happen. But at the same time, we are planning for it to fail. We might want it to succeed, but we still plan for it to fail.
Did you ever come across Israeli guys that did what you did in the Middle East? And if so, how was it for you?
Yeah, no, definitely. You will. It's hard. It's almost impossible to do that job and not run into Israelis because the Israeli intelligence agencies, especially certain special operations units, are as prevalent as we are, especially in that area. Maybe not so much other parts of the world where we are also, but we definitely run into them in that area. And, a lot of them are extreme patriots. And, that there is a difference in how we view the world than how they view the world. Israel views the world through this existential crisis that they're fighting for their survival. And, obviously there's definitely some merit to that. And then that's where we start to sort of, and how we look at that sort of dictates the differences of how we conduct war, because we do conduct war differently than Israel does.
Yeah. I mean, I do think Israel is facing something like that, man. I mean,
yeah.
And I don't think Israel personally, and it's okay if you disagree with me, man. I won't get offended.
No. They've been, you look at the entire history, they've been invaded by multiple countries all at the same time. Everybody's been seeking their destruction, and only because of their ability to beat everybody back did they eventually get peace by all their surrounding nations or communities, -1 or -2, really. And so there is truth to that. They're definitely right. But there is a point, that's where it goes back to, there's no black and white. Everything's gray, right? At some point, you have to adjust your response to things. And there's a time and place for everything, right? Hezbollah, the whole issue is you have to remember Hezbollah is a proxy of Iran. So them attacking Hezbollah, Iran obviously has an issue because those are their boys, right? But that's not necessarily the entire sentiment in Lebanon. Like, obviously, the government within Lebanon is not exactly the biggest fans of Hamas.
Yeah.
Or Hezbollah.
Hezbollah.
Right? Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah.
I would say many Lebanese don't. I said this recently. Many Lebanese don't like Hezbollah.
And from my understanding, their current stance on it is they're against them. Right. So, I think, and this is where the issue is, they're doing what they believe, which is to protect their country and their people. And they're attacking this group, which is not the country of Lebanon, is a group within Lebanon, but they're a proxy of Iran. And so Iran's upset about you attacking, their agents, right? So, and this is where I think the whole thing gets stupid, because what did Iran think? Like, you think we're going to do a peace between Israel, the United States, the Gulf countries, and Iran? And you can just be like, oh, and you can't attack our other people in other countries that aren't even adjacent. And you can make these demands. And so the demands coming out of Iran are really kind of ridiculous. If you kind of really look at it, they really have no position. But the hardliners in that country are the ones making those claims and making those demands. So.
It's interesting, man. Like when I find it rich when we have a trader like John Carricow, and he's making a podcast and he's talking about how Israel spies on the United States. And then it's almost like we barely, and then obviously there are bot farms in these hostile countries that promote the heck out of that. They do unbelievable psyops. But then we completely overlook the fact that that was actually a psyop. The guy literally confesses to getting paid by Russia. And we completely barely ever will hear about the Chinese agents that were literally just caught in America.
Yeah.
And I would just imagine if every country is spying on every country. In my view, man, I look at Israel as fighting. I'm not an Israeli citizen, I'm an American citizen. I look at Israel as fighting on the front lines of Western civilization. Many people don't know. You go to Israel, man, everyone's pretty much strapped.
Yeah.
A guy at the cafe strapped. It's like the wild, wild west out there, man. And they know, and they know what terrorism is, man. And it's crazy because India is dealing with these terrorists. Western Europe's dealing with these terrorists. North America is dealing with these terrorists. And I'd say if Israel, and I think it's bad if anyone does it to America, obviously. And if I were to join any military, I would join America. I would, if I wanted to do that work, I would have joined America. However, what I want to say is that compared to other countries like China, Qatar, who hate us, if many people don't know, you go to Israel, okay, in Israel, downtown in the city center on the highway, you literally will find billboards, man, billboards of Trump.
Yeah,
he is a celebrated hero. Whereas if you go to Iran, they're burning the American flag and they're wishing death upon us. So it's like, I don't think, I think that like, okay, like little brother is trying to find out a little bit of like, just something small, but little brother loves big brother. Whereas you got like China, Qatar, Iran, no, they hate this guy.
Yeah.
So that said, if you were to pick the three countries that are probably doing the most damage, spying, collecting information behind enemy lines right now in America, which three countries would those be?
It would be China and Russia is the top two. The third, that's actually, it would probably be, if I was to use a metric as far as the capabilities that a country has outside of China and Russia, it would probably be Iran. And I'm going to say this. Okay, so let's get this thing. Everybody spies on everybody. We spy on all our friends. They spy on us. Like, oh my, we got caught spying on the Germans, and the Germans got spying on us. Whatever. Let's just put that in the real world. We do ourselves. They do to protect themselves. That's just how it is, right? To be honest, probably the third country that probably spies on the United States outside of Russia and China is probably one of our allies. But, we're probably the biggest spies in their respective countries. So, I think as far as our enemies, it would be Russia and China, probably China number one, Russia number two, and then probably Iran number three.
Do you think if we don't have any legislation to ever stop this hurricane, this avalanche, this tsunami of them having disinformation teams use our American social media for free, maybe even make money using it, going viral, having bot farms that do coordinated campaigns of disinformation to isolate us from our allies. And then they have Qatar, let's say, buying out a whole podcast system in Nashville, Tennessee, podcasts like Shawn Ryan, Candace Owens, Brett Cooper, Theo Vaughn, and so forth. Who knows what's going on with Red Seat Ventures. Because I think that when there's a lot of smoke, maybe there's fire there. And I think that there's something sketchy going on with that company. I can't prove it. I don't know but I think there's something, and I'm surprised no one has exposed them, because I think they would get a lot of views and recognition, like a Nick Shirley or someone. I don't know.
Yeah.
Not necessarily.
I was just thinking Nick Shirley. Yeah.
But
someone
I
like Nick Shirley.
Yeah, or maybe like a former, like Wall Street Journal investigative journalist. But I think that there's something going on there. Now, that said, like you and I can talk about disinformation 24/7.
Yeah.
But the fact is, you, me, and 100,000 other guys, we can do this 24/7, fight this. But if they put 1 million guys and they put $2 billion a year for the next decade, they have completely undermined, demoralized, destroyed our society, where we don't trust each other. We don't trust the media. We don't trust the institutions. We don't trust our neighbors. Like, we're literally at that point. And we even have Americans at that point, let's say in 2035, 2036, that are actually saying the propaganda. I hear some of these Gen Z influencers, bro, they're straight up sounding like they're reading the fucking manual of the CCP or, KGB propaganda at this point. And it's someone that's in like Mississippi. And I don't think they're getting paid. I don't think they're getting paid. I don't think they even went to, I don't even think they had a professional job prior to getting on TikTok, for example.
Yeah.
So what I'm thinking is, okay, if we're here in 2026, in 2036, if we don't have any legislation to not let these hostile countries buy our politicians, buy our schools, which is crazy that Qatar and CCP can give money to our schools. Crazy when you think about that, right? And then also our media and podcasts. Now, someone might say to me, Nima, we're not a commie. Look at the Jew. He's trying to say he wants to censor my free speech. Go back, Jew. No, that's not what I'm saying. That's actually not what I'm saying. That's actually not, it is what I'm saying, but it's not the complete thing of what I'm saying. The complete thing of what I'm saying is, why is there no reciprocity? At the very least, if countries like China, Qatar are dealing in good faith, is it unreasonable to say to these two countries, hey, look, China, you know what? We're going to let you have TikTok. We're going to let you spend $1 billion on our schools. We're going to let you go buy MTG, or Tucker, whoever it is. We're going to let you buy that. And we're going to let you do propaganda in our country. And we're going to let you go all out and put your China communist manuals and newspapers in your, in our country. We're going to welcome it because we respect free speech. But Stoic Viking, we're going to give him $10 million to open up outside of Shenzhen. We're going to have Nima go open up a podcast studio outside Shenzhen. And then we're going to hire 5 of your big Chinese influencers. And we're going to pay them each $15 million. And then we're going to open up bot farms in nearby Taiwan. And we're going to just infiltrate your social media. We want to use WeChat. We want to use all your Chinese social media apps. And we're going to run campaigns. And we're going to actually lie about what Xi Jinping says. We're going to lie about why should China even be involved in Pakistan? Why are they involved in Pakistan? Why don't they just go China first and get out of Pakistan? Why are they even involved in China and India? Why are they even involved with Cuba? Why are they even involved with Venezuela and Brazil right now? Why don't they just go focus on China first? Like, why can't, and we're also going to have a $2 billion budget to go to Chinese universities and promote capitalism, not communism. But they would never do that because they're not idiots. They would never allow us to do that. So this is my question to you. So we are in a situation now where for the next 10 years, all these countries that have now looked at what we've let the abuse and the rape of our social media the last 2-3 years, the next 10 years, bro, the next 10 years, now Turkey might jump in. Hey, everyone, Qatar's having fun. China's having fun. Russia's having fun. Why can't I join the fun? Erdogan thinks, well, you know what? I'm going to go put $100 million into doing the same thing in America. And then all of a sudden, before you know it, Cuba does it. Then all of a sudden, before you know it, North Korea does it. Then all of a sudden, before you know it, every country that hates the United States, then all of a sudden in 10 years, this is a $1 trillion industry. And they do it until, and all these Americans take it, right? They get rich. Hey, America blows up. Who gives a fuck? You know, I'll go buy a house in Qatar, just like Tucker. Tucker goes, buys a luxury home in Qatar. He has his escape plan, bro. He's not the idiot we think he is. He's a traitor. He's a traitor, but he's not an idiot. He has his escape plan. Easily, he has his, he's thought this through. He has his escape plan. There are American, listen, man, in Israel, let me tell you some crazy shit. In Israel, there was a guy, like $500-600, bro. Met the guy on social media, sold out where the IDF was to the IRGC in Iran. And the IRGC in Iran attacked right in that coordinate in Israel. He risked Israelis getting murdered for like $500-600 with someone he didn't even know.
Yeah.
Fucking guy was a traitor.
Yeah.
We have traitors here in the United States, man.
Yeah.
And if there's not any punishment for these traitors, if Benny Johnson, Tim Pool get $500,000 a month, if there's no punishment for these traitors, then we're saying there's no enforcement. And if there's no punishment to these foreign countries, then we're saying there's no enforcement. So you're saying that these countries can do complete attack on our country and they have nothing to lose. They just make it illegal for Stoic Viking to open up a podcast studio in Shenzhen and Nima to open up a podcast studio. And then for you and I to have a $200 million budget that you and I now can go get 4 beautiful Chinese influencers, women, and pay them a good salary. And then another, because obviously you and me are not Chinese. No, we go get a Chinese influencer. We tell them to move to Shenzhen. And we have these beautiful podcast studios, and we're going to give them nice salaries. And they're going to promote capitalism. They're going to promote democracy. They're going to promote freedom. They're going to promote why communism is horrible.
Mm-hmm.
They'd never let that, bro. And one more thing. How dare I say they will promote Judeo-Christian values? How dare I say they would promote the Bible? How dare I say that? But I say it. And anti-communist. But they would never allow us, bro. So do you think we can survive another decade of this? What's the solution?
Well, you run into one of the biggest problems that it comes to being a country that tries to hold the highest level of character and values and give its citizens and people who want to become citizens the most amount of rights, right? Because we have this freedom of speech, which everybody would love, but do our enemies take advantage of it? Absolutely. So how do you, and this is sort of an age-old question of the concept of freedom versus security, because usually those are two competing concepts. How much security do you give your nation and your people to the point where it infringes on your people's rights, freedoms, and civil liberties? And that's not an easy question. We go back to concepts like the Patriot Act and things like that. At what point do we let our government do levels of surveillance and actions against their perceived enemies, right? Because that's a slippery slope. Who's an enemy, right? Somebody in the government is like, okay, yeah, the Chinese, that's easy, right? But this guy is like 3 generations Chinese, right? Someone could label him as an enemy, and he has nothing to do with it. He's just a guy just trying to live. And maybe he's just like, oh, I like this liberal, this candidate, right? But now he's an enemy of the state for possible. relations with, the Chinese Empire, the CCP, things like that. So it's not an easy question. There's not an easy answer. Unfortunately, when you are trying to be the beacon of freedom, liberty, and truth, you're going to get taken advantage of, and you have to combat that with the only really way to combat it is education of the generations coming up. So one of the fundamental problems we've been running into is for at least a couple of decades, probably culminating during the COVID crisis, is universities are extremely liberal, right? Which there's nothing wrong with teaching things liberal, but you need to teach both sides of the spectrum. You need to give them two different things to look at. That's why almost everybody comes out of a university, even in the South. Like I lived in Alabama for a couple of years, and I met a lot of conservative people until you went near the universities, and extremely left-minded. So you need to resume this level of education where we teach our generation, like both sides, like, hey, here's the pros and cons of communism. Here's the pros and cons of capitalism. Here's both sides. You make the decision for yourself. Go out in the world and see what happens, right? And what is usually everybody leaves college with the old saying: if you're not a liberal in your 20s, you're heartless. If you're not a conservative in your 30s, you're brainless, right? So like that kind of concept, people get, they have ever evolving concepts, ideas, ideologies, and that's good. Like we should be open-minded to those things, and you should change your mind about things, go out through the world experience. And if we were to pervade that sort of culture, which I think that we are sort of having luckily a bit of a cultural shift back in that direction, because for a while the left was really kind of unimpeded in what they were teaching in schools and also in culture. And obviously it's apparent with how Trump was the first Republican in how many decades to win the popular vote. We have this cultural shift, and there's a huge population, especially in colleges, especially men, who are like fighting against this extreme liberalism that's being taught in colleges, because they're allowing through social media, which is one of the best parts about social media. There's obviously downsides to it. You are getting a lot of these bot farms and propaganda, but I think luckily as a culture, I think a lot of us are wising up and we're seeing through the BS. And that is the only way to fight this without infringing on our civil liberties and the freedoms that make this country what it is.
I mean, do you think some legislation though, like Qatar, China, just can't they can't make billion-dollar contributions a year to our colleges?
Yeah. Well, I know that there's already been progress on that. Like I know that there's been, and I have not tracked the legislation, but I know as soon as like Trump came into office, one of the biggest issues that we have is China buying up land around bases.
Yeah.
And I believe that they introduced legislation to try to stop that. And I definitely, if you can agree, especially when it comes to legislation that specifically targets foreign entities or even like shell companies that have traced to foreign entities, I definitely think that should be, I definitely agree. Where you get into slippery slope is when you start dealing with American citizens and companies owned by Americans.
Yeah, I would love to ask you. So here we are. We have like a IRGC bot account. The guy says, "Kosananat Kuni." He's insulting me, calling me a homosexual.
Yeah.
He says, "Two bozos with room temperature IQ." He says, "Nima, you are an inept, incompetent, uneducated haramzada." So, like, for example, in my view, a IRGC guy that does this sort of trolling, like, to me, he's probably like a rookie. Like he's some kid that's buried, or is just a moron, or he thinks like a moron. Hopefully he's not a moron. He could stop thinking like a moron.
My guess is not very bright, but
Yeah. Like, do you think this is just like the lowest tier? Like this is like the reject of the IRGC? Like this is their bottom barrel?
I don't even think it's a reject of the IRGC. I think that's even giving that person too much credit. Like, I think it's just, I think it's a reject of some sort of, was brought up in some sort of culture, which they're trained to like hate every sort of idea,
Yeah.
that you hold true or that I even hold true. And these people are just severely either undereducated or just no semblance of an education to truly understand the nuances in the world, right? So that's for me. I just like people like that. Like, I actually pity these people. Like, I don't even get upset about it. I pity them because they have no idea what level of it, what little education has led them to just they just do not understand the world. And I guarantee you that person is never going to be successful in their entire life unless they finally come to some realization that you don't know what you don't know.
But like this particular person, like the way he made his insults, it wasn't so much like, it was just insulting me, probably like maybe a teenage kid. But like some of the people that do it, like they're truly locked in on
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that maybe some of the women do it, yes, but I generally, like, it's amazing actually, man. Some of the IRGC accounts on X, bro, I gotta tell you, man, they understand the details of American culture. And I'm just fascinated. Like, do you think they're just in Tehran and they go get a kubi there? They come from their lunch break, they come back and they just understand like the detail of the American in Texas, conservative versus the guy versus the person in Texas in Austin who's a woke leftist, and they understand the detail of that, and to get them to hate each other. Like, it's fucking mind-boggling how much they understand us, man. And what do you think?
Yeah. Well, I think that all these countries, they have the greatest asset in the United States for political disinformation and just level of stupidity, just to regurgitate whatever sound bites, which they didn't even have anything to do with it. We created it. And that's the American liberal woman, aka the Karens. That is their army right there, right? Like, these people, like, typically when I see, luckily most of my content is kind of like most of my audience is male, so I don't really have to experience the Karens as much. But I know in other people who have that sort of, like, where the Karens are there, that's usually the people who are shouting the most asinine, most uneducated comments. And these people are locked in. They literally, it's their ideology. I'm related to people who, it does not matter what you say to them. Like, you can even try to understand their argument, but the second, like, you say anything, like you say either Trump, Orange Man, or MAGA, like you see in their face, they start to melt. They start to shake furiously. They're like, oh my God, this whole Trump derangement. So they are, luckily the Russia and China, they already have the greatest. They don't even need bot farms, to be honest. It helps, obviously, but they have the Karens of the United States to really regurgitate their messages.
So I got one more question here, man. We didn't even get back to the joke. Ken, first of all, I'd love to have you back, man. I'd love to have you back. And the second thing, so I have one last question here. No one talks about the president wife of Joe Kent. Heather Kaiser wrote for a left-leaning outlet. I think it was something like DropNet or something like that. I
believe it's Greystone.
Greystone, that's right. Wrote for a left-leaning outlet whose editor reportedly received payments from sanctioned Iranian broadcaster. So here's my question to you.
Yeah.
In this situation, what's stopping us as Americans to say, hey, you know what? It is illegal to take money from a foreign country that is designated, let's say, a terrorist country or a communist country, to infiltrating do we have to give our enemies this free speech, or does it compromise what we are as Americans? And like you said, goes back to free speech for security, national security. Because I can't figure this out, because I'm like, they got us. It's sort of like that situation of what we were talking about earlier, where it's like, okay, you've unarmed Iranians, and Iranians cannot even go on social media, bro. It's so sad. You go on Instagram and you find Iranian accounts that were big, popular, posting all this content.
Yeah.
Like around, like for the last 2 months, it's been like flat.
Yeah.
And it's so sad. Like they've lost so much, and they can't communicate with the world. They can't make content about what's going on. We just complete blackout. And yeah, so I just like, I'm just saying, okay, so they got us. So the Iranians that want to fight, A, they're unarmed, and B, they can't communicate. They fucking got those guys behind. They got them.
Yeah.
Now, that's that one point. The next point is that Russia, China, Qatar, Iran, they got us because they know we value free speech.
Yeah.
They know our politicians are corrupt. They know the universities want money. They know there's American influencers that will either take some sort of bribe, some money. They'll do an indirect business deal, or they'll do what you were saying earlier. They'll do it because it gets clicks, it goes viral. They'll indirectly incentivize them, and they'll never even know it was Qatar, a bot farm that was pumping them. They'll just never know, and they can plead innocent, and they are innocent. So it's like they have us in this situation where we have to compromise who we are as a country, or they win. Is there a solution here, or do they got us the same way the IRGC has the unarmed Iranians who also now can't even communicate?
Yeah. So this is actually probably even breaks into even a more philosophical question. So as the United States, we are the closest thing to, we are the world's greatest power, right? And when you look at the fall of empires, usually we look towards as probably the Roman Empire as an example of one similar, we have a governmental system that was sort of a amalgamation of what we saw going on between the Greeks, the Romans, and the British, which is how we created our government. So, but a lot of the things we have so much origin from the Roman Empire of how we saw good things, and then we try to adapt them to the modern society and concepts. When we look back at history, how do we stop our current empire, let's just call it that, from falling? And for the first time in history, we have the ability, access to as much as history as we can to learn from the mistakes that we've made in the past. The question is, will we, right? And so this goes back to, the issues you're talking about are real issues, and then they need to be dealt with in certain ways. But the way that we have set up things, it is not a perfect system, right? We came up with a system which I think is currently the best system there is. I think eventually human society will create a better system, but that's just what we do. We create newer and better systems. We take the old, as long as we learn from the past. But how do we get to solving these particular issues? And I think it comes from learning from the past, understanding it, and then keeping our people of our society as educated as possible to every aspect of history. What has worked in the past, what has not, right? And that's usually why you keep getting these people who are like, oh, communism's not so bad, right? And it's always people who never experienced communism. And it's the people who experience communism who are telling those people that you're idiots, right? You didn't experience it, but look in a history book. But they don't want to. They look through these rose-tinted glasses. Yeah, communism's great in concept. It is. It's amazing. But it never works for a reason, right? So you have to learn these concepts, how they failed, what succeeds, right? And going to the politicians, right? We have a current system which was designed to be as probably not hard to corrupt, right? But every system eventually gets corrupted. But there are people within our government who are trying to fight this. There are politicians who are trying to put towards legislation that is like, hey, you shouldn't be allowed to trade while you're in. You should have term limits, all these different things. But it's getting shot down by their peers, because their peers are being funded by these programs, right? And these donors who don't want these things to go away, right? So how do you fight that, right? We do have people who are trying to fight it, but currently their voices are not really being heard very well. but I think if you continue to teach our younger generation, the lessons learned through history, we have the ability to be the first empire in human history to not fall, right? But that's only if we listen. It's only if we pay attention to history and we learn from our mistakes, because we are constantly going to make them along the way. But that's the path, because we have a society that's built on these amazing ideas, but we have to let history and education and critical thinking and open-mindedness to help us kind of lead that way to what led our founding fathers to create this country in the first place and set the Constitution and the Bill of Rights to be that documentation that was the best documentation that's been written, at that point in history.
We got thank you, Major Samar Paltor. He's actually a war hero in India. Yeah, man. He
nice.
did, like, similar to you. He did special ops, and he's like a legit war hero. You ever come across RAW, India Special Security Services? You ever come across them?
I never really did anything involving India. I did do stuff with Pakistan in the ISS. Or ISI, I'm sorry, but never India. So, but I actually have played polo against many military officers. So my question to Major Paul would be like, does he play polo? Which would be my guess is that he does, because most Indian officers do. I think, and Pakistani officers do too as well.
Nice, man. It's just to wrap up here, guys. I don't know, for some reason now, I guess a lot more people are joining the stream. What's crazy, man, is that at the end, I had a friend of mine. He said something. Well, this guy I know. He said at CENTCOM, it was very bizarre for him because there were Pakistanis that were there working alongside of them. I mean, this is nothing like classified. I'm saying it's open.
No,
but I'm saying, like, how is that possible that Pakistan is it something as, like, there's something going on, obviously, that Pakistan of all countries is so involved with us.
So that's
involved with China.
Yeah. So that's interesting. No, so that's interesting. So to really understand Pakistan, you have to understand it's a very divided people, and it's very divided based on its socioeconomic class. There is a lot of really, like, the people that are higher up in the government in Pakistan are extremely well educated. They're almost always Western educated. And when you deal with Pakistan, a lot of the Pakistani elite, or the upper portions of their government or their people, are very pro-Western. But the rest of their country, which is not in those positions, are very anti-West. So you have a very divided country, really based on a socioeconomic class. So you'll get a lot of Pakistani officers, like when we worked with ISI officers, super pro, like they were anti-Taliban, they were pro-American, what we were trying to do. But then the people that were obviously assisting the Taliban, or Osama bin Laden and people like that, that's where that support comes from. And obviously there's people within the government that are not the biggest fans of us, but there definitely are. But most of them are Western educated. And so that's where usually the biggest divide that you see in Pakistan is between the upper level and the poor people of the country, which is a much larger group.
We're most of this is the last question, I promise, man. Is we're a lot of the guys in ISI. Would you say it's evenly split in there too? Where half?
Majority of the ISI officers were highly well educated Pakistani, and they were very at that time, they were very anti-Taliban. And they were very keen on helping us in most cases. We did get indications sometimes that if we were going after somebody that maybe that they knew, they were friends with, or maybe had some relations, because you're always going to get people who are not the biggest fans, but majority, I feel like, of ISI was very helpful. But we did run into a couple ISI officers who were like slow rolling us on sources or targets.
But doesn't it only take one or two ISI guys that's like a terrorist to leak everything?
Just takes one person, really. But that's also why, and not every, but most intelligence services, not all of them do this, right? I don't know where Pakistan's intelligence service is based on this, but like, for example, as an American intelligence service, we have something that's called compartmentalization, which means that no one person could leak every single secret. Like you're only given, you may have a top secret level security clearance, but everybody, even within top secret, you were only given access to whatever is deemed your compartment. So you don't get access to everything. It's called compartmentalization. And most modern intelligence organizations use this, but not all of them. And I don't know where Pakistan is as far as the compartmentalization of their intelligence organizations.
They do a pretty good job, man. I
Yeah.
would say they punch above their weight. Pakistan
Yeah.
punch. One of my good friends is Pakistani. He's in Abu Dhabi. Him and I, it's crazy. I've known him for more than 20. Went to school together in Northern Virginia. When I went to Northern Virginia Community College. So man, but he ended up finishing college. I did it. I went to business, but him and I argue. And we never argued for more than 20 years in our friendship. Literally never. And for some reason, after this October 7th situation, I noticed him, and he benefits from the UAE. You know, UAE has been getting attacked by Iran. Yeah. And I'm just there talking to him, and he's completely engaged in this degenerate going out to the nightclub, having fun with women. He's not at all. He is not at all like these terrorist guys. You know, they look at him as a degenerate, probably. You know, but I noticed since October 7th how he got more and more into this Pakistani view, Pakistani anti-West view. And I'm just there arguing. I'm like, bro, you understand? You're how it's fucking it's like my boy. I'm like, bro, you understand how fucking crazy you sound? The shit you're saying? Yeah. And bro, in the last 2 years, I feel like our country's gone through this indoctrination camp that people are not coming out the same, man. America does not look the same. My wife was just telling me this earlier today in the car. I go to Israel this weekend, and I was go for a quick trip, and then she was like, "You're going to Israel?" I'm like, "Yeah, I go, a few days." And then she's like, "Oh, I remember when a lot of people would go to Israel here in Germany. The German tourists like to go to Israel." And I was like, "Oh, okay." She's like, "Yeah, but now no one's pretty much going to Israel." And I was thinking, wow, that's so sad because I love to go vacation in Israel as an American tourist. I love to vacation in Israel. And it's sad that now less people like to go. And to me, that's one sign that the disinformation and indoctrination is working. These psyops are working on America, man.
Well, I think it works to a certain effect. I'll give you an example. So one, generally, and almost at all times, Europe sits farther left than whatever is going on in the United States. Even if Obama or Biden, usually the left, Europe sits even farther left than that. But if I saw the EU Parliament just passed some legislation, I believe they're called regrouping areas or something like that. Basically, it was the first step of legislation of helping to start deporting people out of the EU, right? And we see this time and time again. And I think people a lot of times have short memories. There's a constant swing back and forth. I think between the 2010s, we definitely swung very left. And I think now we're swinging very right. We're starting to see it. Obviously, it happened first in the United States, and it's starting to happen in Europe. But because of that, because Europe's always been kind of farther left in the left side of things, has never really been a fan of Israel. It doesn't surprise me that people in Europe oh yeah, we don't want to go there, right? But you even look at I travel a lot and I go to Europe, and it's very interesting to talk to people in Europe and what the perceptions of what's going on in America, right? And it's usually this extremely hyperbolic, oh, we hear that you're Homeland Security is murdering 40,000 people. Basically, we're the equivalent of what the Islamic Republic is doing to its protesters. That's what ICE is apparently doing in the United States, which is not true, right? So people are in echo chambers. I'm sure because Pakistan goes through its own waves of, their left, their right, or their versions of it. But I'm sure that your friend has somehow gotten into a little bit of an echo chamber and is just hearing what he's going on. He's getting radicalized. It happens to a lot of people. The only way out of it is for people to remain being open-minded, look at the analysis, do your critical thinking, and make up your own mind. And try your best to stay out of echo chambers. And then if you are getting upset when anybody questions any of your views, it's no longer a political view or political party you're part of a cult. If you cannot have your ideology questioned, you are a part of a cult. So, yeah.
Yeah, man, I tell you, it's even with even with our politics, man, like Randy Fine going against Dan Bilzerian. I guarantee you Dan Bilzerian is going to get so many bot farms to promote him. He's going to ratio Randy Fine all the way till that election day. He's gonna do tweets. He's gonna fight Randy Fine. He's gonna get like 80,000 likes. Randy's gonna get like 3,000. Even if most of those bots are out of Pakistan. You remember that guy James Fishback?
I don't think I do.
got James. Yeah, he's running for governor of Florida. He told Brian. He calls him Brian or something like that. And he his competitor. And one black guy came up to him and he was like, "Hey, what'd you do with that teenage girl?" And then James Fishback says, "Hey, look after yourself because we're going to hang you." He told the black guy he's going to hang him in a southern state like Florida. This just happened like the past week or so. Yeah. But then it just came out that James Fishback is so botted. But yet he's getting invited to that like little Qatari podcast circle. And he's so focused on getting America out of the Middle East and getting America to not support Israel. Yeah. It's amazing, bro. His campaign is so Israel first, and he's running for state governor of Florida. Yeah. And it's almost like it's a psyop. Like, it's almost like, and I don't know, is it a psyop of like a Republican that's trying to just make Republicans look bad to help Democrats? Or I don't know, is it a psyop where he's coming in to just get America out of the Middle East? Or is it a psyop where he just wants to be a podcast influencer and he's doesn't care about governor? Maybe all of these. I don't know, man. But it's But he got caught red-handed. Yeah. And his support is very small. Like it's very small. It's like single digit. But still.
Yeah. Well, so I want to touch on this real quick. So the concept of psyops and conspiracy theories, right? If you go back 30, 40 years, back to the 70s, like if you ever said the word conspiracy theory, right? We didn't say psyop back then, but generally conspiracy theory, most people like, you're crazy, right? But now that we've proven some of these conspiracy theories are correct, and this goes along with psyops, like we have proven that there have been psyops and there have been conspiracy theories. One, this is good. There's a good and bad part of this. The good part is that we can now, like, it's better. We can now talk about conspiracy theories and psyops more openly, and we can sort of investigate them better now, right? Because it's now more socially acceptable to even say that. And you got people like Nick Shirley, who's going around and doing the groundwork, doing good investigative journalism to figure this stuff out. The bad side of this is now that it's socially acceptable, everything is a conspiracy theory and everything is now a psyop, right? So then the issue is, how do you weed through it, right? And this is really why I just harp on this so much, right? You have to wait. Like, one, if you want to do the work, be a Nick Shirley, get out there, do the work, right? But if you're somebody who just sits back and you just report on content and you don't do any investigative journalism or something, do us all a favor and wait till evidence comes out, since you're not going to be the one who goes and gets it. And so that's what I try to do. And that was kind of like my initial video that I did about Joe Kent, right? Because I actually know Joe Kent to be a man of character. Obviously, he has different opinions, but everybody was immediately just jumping on this bandwagon. And everybody who hated him 2 years prior was championing him as this new hero for the left. And then everybody who loved him on the right was now calling him a traitor and a wussy, right? So, you have to sit back and you have to wait for evidence to come out, and usually when something happens, you have political posturing and propaganda. That's the first thing that comes out of everybody's mouth. So you got to be careful and do your own thinking and have a mind for yourself and get out of your echo chamber.
So so we were talking here. Here's this guy, James Fishback, bought bots. This is a big no-no. I believe this is a suspension offense. This is the guy. Like I guess there was it was involved. I guess there was evidence in a like in a trial or something like that.
Yeah.
That it made it very clear. And here it is. Reply. I agree. Kind of crazy what's going on. Did you read Fishback lawsuit against David linked in the tweet? And then he said, buy another 100, buy 250 tweets. Like he got caught red-handed.
Yeah. Well, some people, if you're gonna cheat, at least not be an idiot.
Yeah, I mean, he got caught red-handed.
Yeah.
So anyway,
well, luckily, I feel like as these things happen, right? Anytime there's some sort of new technology or new technique, people are not wise to it immediately, but we eventually are. Like, people for the longest time were using bot farms, but I feel like bot farms are super easily identified nowadays, and they're just nowhere near as effective. But they were at a point of time. But that doesn't mean they're going to come up with some other way to, your PSYOP or whatever, how to help push people's views and push a narrative. They'll come up with a new way, and it's going to be hard to identify it first. But then eventually, as long as we continue to educate ourselves, keep an open mind, I think we have a chance to figure it out. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, on a final note, man, I talk to people like, how does it look the next decade, man? And I think, when you said something about philosophy, are we balancing freedom and national security, and is the correct way to actually just confront it? Because that's actually the only way we can have our freedom. But that's the way we protect ourselves. Like, man, you gave me something to think about. Man. And it's been a pleasure having you. Seriously, man. Guys, this Stoic Viking is a very talented dude, man. He just started, I think. Honestly, he's already getting a pretty good following, and he's the truth. He understands what he's doing. He's actually did special ops, served our country, if for no other reason than just to support another veteran. It'd be amazing. If you guys give them some support, where could everyone find you?
So on YouTube, which is where this is my main effort for my content, is the Stoic Viking, and on Instagram is Stoic Viking 2025.
Okay. All right, guys. I think that's it, man. I think, hey, brother, this was a fantastic, thank you. Love you too, man. Hope it's a woman that said that. Whoever said that to me, man. Yeah. But hey, it was a pleasure having you, bro. Keep up what you're doing. And I definitely would love to have you back.
Yeah. Mom noon, Nima.
Yeah, man. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom.